Chapter 1. The dull ache in my belly was coming more often. At first, I thought it was just the cold weather. Until one night, the pain curled me up on the bed, cold sweat soaking through my pajamas. That's when I remembered adding a kidney check to my prenatal visit. The day I got the report, the sky was spitting fine snow. I stood by the window in the hospital corridor, watching the snowflakes melt into watery trails. My fingers trembled clutching the thin paper, shaking like a leaf in an autumn storm. Miss Baxter, the doctor's voice echoed in my ears, laced with professional detachment. Your kidney function is severely compromised. Carrying this pregnancy will place an enormous burden on them. The only way now is to terminate the pregnancy. Hat might buy you some time for treatment. No. The word was out of my mouth almost before he finished. My throat yawned. The baby is innocent. I don't remember how I left the hospital. The snow fell heavier, the world outside a blinding expanse of white. I walked slowly, each step feeling like I was treading on cotton. The doctor's words kept replaying in my head, won't last long, extremely high risk. When I pushed open the front door, warmth mixed with sharp curses rushed over me. Delia, you finally decided to come back. Father stood up abruptly, jostling the teacup beside him. Look at that belly. What are you, a child yourself, doing getting knocked up? You've shamed us. Mother Saturday on the sofa, dabbing at her tears. Beside her, Lisa was gently patting her back. Mirroring the commotion, Lisa looked up. Her almond-shaped eyes, identical to Mother's, curved into a smile. Her voice was soft. You're back. Mom and Dad are just worried, don't take it to heart. She was wearing a new cashmere sweater, one Mother had just bought her last week. The padded jacket I wore was last year's discount model. Worried. I think she did it on purpose. Mother's voice suddenly spiked, and she glared at me venomously. If you hadn't let go of Liza's hand at the amusement park back then, how could those traffickers have taken her? All those years we were separated. I never blamed you for that, and now you dare do something so disgraceful. Again. Ever since Lisa was found and brought home, letting go at the amusement park had become a sword hanging over my head, constantly pulled out to stab me. At first, I tried to explain that the crowd was huge, that Lisa had wrenched her hand free and run towards the cotton candy stall. But no one believed me. They only believed their own flesh and blood, the poor little victim who'd suffered at the traffickers' hands and needed extra pampering now that she was back. No one remembered that I had chased after her that day, that both of us had been gagged and shoved into a van. No one remembered that when the kidnappers called demanding ransom, Mother had cried into the phone, we only have 200,000. Save Lisa first, she's our real child. I was adopted. That fact became painfully clear after Lisa was born. When I was little, they had doted on me too, taken me boating in the park, bought me strawberry ice pops. It was only after Mother's belly started to swell that the look in their eyes began to change. The day Lisa was born, Father held the swaddled infant, smiling at Mother, now we have our own child. In that moment, clutching a freshly drawn picture of our family, I stood in the hospital doorway, feeling like an unwanted shadow. Delia, you look terrible. Are you sick? Liza's voice pulled me back to the present. She stood up as if to come help me, but Mother yanked her back. Don't touch her. Who knows what filth she's picked up out there? Mother's voice was shrill. I'm telling you, Delia, that child has to go. Otherwise, don't you dare set foot in this house again. I looked at them and suddenly felt exhausted. Too tired to explain, to argue, even to breathe. Leaning against the doorframe, I took a slow step back. Melted snow from my shoes left a small, dark patch on the floor. This baby. My voice was soft but unyielding. I won't get rid of it. End this house. I don't plan to stay. The pain in my body flared again, like a hand slowly tightening inside me. Isang turned and pulled open the door. Cold wind carrying snowflakes rushed in, stinging my face like tiny knives. Behind me, Liza's panic cry followed. Delia, it's snowing out. Chapter 2. The cold wind whipped snow dust down my collar. I pulled my old padded jacket tighter and trudged down the path dusted with thin snow. Liza's cries faded behind me. That little bit of fake concern felt like a needle pricking my heart. I touched my belly. Nestled quietly there was a little life, my only tether to this world now. I hadn't gotten far when the pain surged back, fiercer than before. Leaning against a roadside tree, I bent double, gasping for breath. Black spots danced before my eyes. Snow landed on my eyelashes, melting into water that mixed with the wetness at the corners of my eyes. Delia. A familiar voice sounded above me, tinged with uncertainty. I jerked my head up, meeting a pair of eyes filled with concern. The man wore a black down jacket, zipped all the way up, revealing only half his face. But those eyes. I knew them too well. Under the old tree at the orphanage, he'd lean against the trunk watching me practice writing, sunlight catching his eyelashes that same look. The day he was adopted, he looked at me just like that and said, Delia, you have to be happy. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt frozen shut. No sound came out. I never thought I'd see him again, least of all like this, at my most wretched. Gavin hurried over, shrugging off his down jacket and draping it over my shoulders. The warmth still holding his body heat instantly enveloped me. You look awful. His hand touched my forehead, then my ice-cold cheek. The heat of his fingertips made me flinch. Gavin. I finally found my voice, hoarse with disbelief. Gavin steadied me, his brow deeply furrowed. Get in the car first. It's too cold out here. Miss Car, a brand new SUV, was parked nearby. Settling into the passenger seat, the warm air hit me, and I slowly came back to myself. Gavin handed me a bottle of water, then rummaged in his bag for a chocolate bar. Here, something to tide you over. You look ghostly pale. I unwrapped it and shoved it into my mouth. The sweetness spread, but couldn't mask the bitterness inside. How did you recognize me? He smiled, a complex emotion I couldn't read flickering in his eyes. I'd know you anywhere. Silence stretched in the car, broken only by the rhythmic swipe of the windshield wipers. Snow continued to fall, blurring the world outside into white. I watched his hands on the steering wheel, knuckles distinct. The same hands that had held mine crossing streets as a child. And you? Why are you back? Job transfer. He said it lightly. And to find you. My heart skipped a beat. Find me. He remembered that promise. Did it take long? I asked softly. Yeah. He nodded, his gaze dropping to my swollen belly, his eyes darkening. You got married. My heart clenched. I instinctively wanted to hide my stomach, but he caught my hand. His palm was warm, radiating a reassuring strength. Don't be afraid. I didn't mean anything by it. He said. I'm just worried about you. I bit my lip, hesitating for a long moment, but decided to tell him. No. This baby. It was an accident. He didn't press further, just started the car. Where to? I'll drive you. I gave him the address to my small rented apartment, far from my adoptive parents' place. I'd moved out precisely to escape the sight of their hypocritical faces. When the car stopped outside the building, I unbuckled my seatbelt and made to hand back his jacket, but he stopped me. Keep it on. It's freezing. But you. I'm fine. He smiled, opening his door. Labing isang I'll walk you up. The stairwell was unlit, pitch black, Enrique of Mildo. Gavin went first, lighting the way with his phone, turning back often to steady me. On the third floor, I fumbled for my keys and opened the door. A wave of cold air greeted us. Come in, I said. He nodded and followed me inside. The place was tiny, one bedroom and a minuscule living room. The furniture was all second-hand, old styles, but I'd kept it meticulously clean. I poured him water, standing awkwardly to the side like a guilty child. You live alone? He asked. Yeah. I nodded. Thank you for driving me home. Don't mention it. He stood up. I should go. Get some rest. At the door, he paused and turned back to me. Delia, take care of yourself. If anything is needed, just tell me. I nodded, watching his back disappear down the dark stairwell before closing the door and sliding down against it. Tears finally fell, hitting the cold floor, spreading small dark patches. Gavin, you came back too late. Chapter 3. One day, I was watching TV at home when the doorbell rang. I thought it was Gavin. He'd been bringing me food lately, using concern as an excuse. I opened the door only to find Lisa standing there, holding a thermal container. Delia, I came to see you. She smiled with an innocent sweetness. I frowned. What do you want? If not, I'm closing the door. Don't be like that. She blocked the door with her hand and slipped inside. Mom made you chicken soup, told me to bring it. Look at you, living alone here, it must be so hard. She placed the container on the table, unscrewing the lid. A rich aroma filled the air. I looked at the soup and sneered inwardly. I don't need it, I said. Take it back. Pelia. How can you say that? Liza's eyes instantly reddened, tears welling up. Mom and Dad were really upset when they heard you moved out. Mom didn't sleep a wink last night, just to make this soup for you. Even if you don't care about me, you should care about them. They're worried about me. I laughed. They're worried about the baby in my belly, worried I'll ruin their precious reputation. How can you think that? Liza's tears spilled over. They raised you all these years. Even if they weren't perfect parents, they did their part. Seeing you like this must break their hearts. I watched her performance, feeling only disgust. Finish. Then leave. Lisa wiped her tears, suddenly grabbing my hand with an expression of deep concern. Delia, I know you're angry. But you're pregnant now, you can't be upset all the time. No good for the baby. Her hand lightly stroked my belly. How many months along? He looks healthy. Instinctively tried to pull away, but she tightened her grip. Her nails were long, digging into my skin. Let go. I snapped. Don't be like that. Her smile grew even more innocent. I'm just concerned about you and the baby. Just then, she suddenly stumbled, shrieking as she fell backward. I was startled, frozen for a split second before hearing thud as she hit the floor hard. Ah! My belly. She clutched her abdomen, face deathly pale, a sheen of cold sweat beading her forehead. It hurts. Delia, why did you push me? I was stunned. I hadn't touched her. You're lying. I didn't push you. I protested urgently. Her tears fell like broken pearls. I know you hate me, but the baby in my belly is innocent. Uply then did I notice her belly was also slightly swollen. Not obvious, but definitely pregnant. When had she gotten pregnant? Who was the father? While I was still reeling, the door crashed open. My adoptive parents charged in. Seeing Lisa on the floor, my adoptive mother screamed and threw herself over her daughter. Lisa. What happened? Mom. Lisa saw her and cried harder. Delia. You vicious witch. Mother sprang up, jabbing a finger at my face. Getting yourself knocked up by some bastard isn't enough. Now you try to hurt my Liza. I'll kill you today. The anticipated pain didn't come. I opened my eyes to see Gavin shielding me. The switch landed on his back with a crack. Gavin! I cried out. Gavin glanced back at me, then turned to my parents, his voice icy. What are you doing? Who are you? Get lost, this is none of your business. Father roared. Killing her would be too good for her. I looked at her face, feeling only nausea. I didn't push her. She fell by herself. Fine. Fine, still denying it. My adoptive mother trembled with rage. Gavin pointed to a small camera mounted high in the corner. Was worried about Delia leaving alone. I installed that yesterday. Let's see the footage. Was she pushed? Or did Liza fall? Liza's face instantly drained of color, panic flooding her eyes. What? Afraid to look. Gavin gave a cold laugh. Apologize now, and I'll forget this. My adoptive mother looked from Liza to Gavin, her face alternating between purple and white. Sorry, she spat through gritted teeth. We misunderstood. Chapter 4. An apology. Is that all? Gavin looked at them, his gaze icy. You falsely accused Delia and tried to assault her. This doesn't end here. What do you want? My adoptive mother eyed him warily. First, you apologize to Delia sincerely and promise never to harass her again. Gavin stated. Second, if there are any problems with Liza's pregnancy, it has absolutely nothing to do with Delia. You will not use it as an excuse to bother her. Why should we listen to you? My adoptive father blustered. Because of what's on that camera. If you don't want the whole world to know what kind of person Liza is, you'll do as I say. My adoptive parents exchanged a look. Finally, they capitulated. They offered a grudging apology, then hurriedly hustled Liza out. Watching their retreating backs, I let out a long breath. My legs felt weak, and I nearly collapsed. Gavin caught me swiftly, the warmth of his palm seeping through my thin sweater, radiating a solid reassurance. It's alright, Delia. His voice was low, like warm water. I'll help you to bed. You should rest. Nodded, leaning heavily on him as he half carried, half supported me into the bedroom. The room was small, an old wooden bed taking up most of the space. Stacks of parenting books I'd saved for months crowded a corner, their pages worn. Gavin tucked the blanket around me and placed a glass of water on the nightstand. I'll clean up the living room. You rest. As he turned to leave, I suddenly grabbed the hem of his jacket. My fingertips brushed the thick, warm fabric of his downcoat. Don't go. My voice was hoarse, carrying an unconscious dependence. Stay with me for a bit. Gavin paused, then Saturday back down on the edge of the bed, taking my cold hand. His palm was warm, slowly warming my fingers, just like when we were kids at the orphanage, when he'd tuck my hands into his coat pockets. Does it still hurt? He asked, his gaze settling on my slightly heaving chest. The dull ache hadn't fully subsided, but what hurt more was the vivid memory of Liza's expertly faked fall. I shook my head, then nodded, tears suddenly welling up. Am I useless? I can't even protect myself. Drag you into this mess too. Don't talk nonsense. He frowned, his thumb gently wiping away a tear at the corner of my eye. You were never a burden. Back at the orphanage, you always shared your bread with stray cats, eating dry cereal yourself. He smiled faintly, a soft light in his eyes. Delia, you've always been brave. I looked at him, my throat tight. He remembered all those small, forgotten moments. The orphanage winters were always bitterly cold. We'd huddle together on a narrow cot under a patched quilt. Gavin, I called out as he stood, the camera. Did it really catch everything? He turned back, a flicker of cunning in his eyes. There is no camera. But with people like that, you need leverage. I stared, then burst out laughing. One afternoon, I was knitting tiny socks for the baby when I heard pounding on the door. I opened the door cautiously, seeing my adoptive mother standing there, her face contorted with rage. What do you want? I instinctively stepped back, gripping the door handle. Delia, how dare you ask me that? She stormed into the living room, her gaze like a knife scraping over my belly. Lisa miscarried. You happy now? I remembered Lisa had been infatuated with a married man, someone very wealthy. She must have hoped the baby would secure her position. No wonder mother was hysterical, afraid of losing that golden ticket. Get out. I don't want to see you. Out. Not that easy. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging deep, almost at breaking the skin. I'll make sure everyone knows you're a slut carrying a bastard and causing a miscarriage. I could no longer hold myself up. My legs gave way, and I started to slide down. I looked down. Blood was indeed seeping through my sweater, blooming like a sinister flower. The pain in my body intensified violently. Black spots swam before my eyes. Gavin's shouts sounded distant, muffled, as if through thick glass. I could feel him gathering me tightly into his arms, his grip almost crushing my bones. But I was beyond crying out. The deep ache in my lower back intertwined with the violent cramping in my belly, like two vipers coiling, slowly devouring my consciousness. Delia. Hold on. I'm taking you to the hospital. His voice trembled. I could feel him staggering slightly as he rushed towards the door with me. The stale, damp smell of the stairwell mixed with the biting cold of the snowy air hit my face. Pressed against his chest, listening to his frantic heartbeat, I felt a sense of peace. If I just let go now, slipped away, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. At least, I wouldn't have to face those vile people or their poisonous words anymore. Don't. Gavin seemed to sense my surrender. He pinched my cheek hard. Delia, look at me. Think of your baby. Didn't you say you'd protect him? The baby. My eyes snapped open. I summoned the last shred of my strength, clutching his jacket. Yes. I couldn't sleep. I had my baby. This little life was my anchor, the reason I'd gritted my teeth and survived the kidnappers, then. I couldn't give up now. The wail of an ambulance siren pierced the air. As I was lifted onto the stretcher, I saw Gavin, eyes rimmed red, gripping my hand fiercely. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Just before consciousness completely faded, I seemed to be back in that kidnapper's warehouse. The dank air thick with rust. A kidnapper, holding a blood-stained whip, sneering, guess your folks really don't want you, huh? Back then, I'd hugged my knees, telling myself over and over, I can't die. Not now. But I'd forgotten living was a hell harder than death. Chapter 5. When I woke again, the sharp scent of disinfectant made me cough. The white ceiling swam dizzyingly. I moved my fingers, feeling the IV needle taped to my hand, the cool fluid getting into my veins. Awake. Gavin's voice was close, thick with exhaustion. How do you feel? I turned my head. He was slumped beside the bed, dark circles under his eyes like bruises, stubble shadowing his jaw. He still wore the same down jacket from that day, now smudged with dust, looking utterly wrecked. The baby. I rasped, my heart hammering against my ribs. Gavin's eyes dimmed. He reached out, brushing my forehead with a touch so gentle it felt fragile. The doctor said. The baby didn't make it. My mind exploded. Blank. Empty. The place where my child had been felt hollowed out, a gaping wound letting in icy drafts. Delia. Gavin tried to find words of comfort, but his voice faltered. The physical pain surged back with terrifying force. It felt like an invisible hand seized my kidney, twisting violently. I curled into a ball, trembling uncontrollably. The heart monitor shrieked its alarm, red numbers flashing wildly. Doctor! Doctor! Gavin leaped up, his voice cracking with panic. She's crashing. A flurry of white coats descended. Lights flashed in my eyes. Cold electrodes pressed onto my chest, making me flinch. HR still dropping. Prep the defibrillator. Epinephrine, 1 miligramo IV push. When the shock hit, it felt like being hurled into the air and slammed back down. Agonitore, a scream from my throat. Tears mingled with sweat. In the haze, I thought I saw my baby so small, curled in a field of white light, waving a tiny hand at me. I don't know how long it took to claw my way back from that void. The heart monitor's beep steadied. The pain was still there, but no longer the suffocating vice. Gavin was asleep beside the bed, his brow still deeply furrowed, caught in some nightmare. Sunlight streamed through the window, gilding his hair, revealing stark white strands. I reached out, wanting to touch his hair. My fingertip barely grazed a strand, and he jolted awake. Seeing my open eyes, he froze for a second, then his eyes reddened. He seized my hand. Delia. How do you feel? Any pain? Thirsty? My voice was sandpaper. He quickly poured water, moistening my cracked lips with a cotton swab. The warm liquid was blissful relief. The doctor said. This kidney episode was very serious. He watched me cautiously, afraid to trigger me. They recommend a kidney transplant. Kidney transplant. The words hit like a boulder, making my head ring. I knew what it meant. Finding a match. Raising a fortune. Surviving countless potential complications. I have no money, I whispered. My adoptive parents had long severed ties. The little I'd saved from odd jobs wouldn't even cover this hospital stay. Don't worry about the money, Gavin said instantly. I've got it covered. I'll handle the costs. You just focus on getting better. Focus on the surgery. Gavin. I looked at him. You don't need to be this good to me. His kindness only deepened my sense of debt. Someone like me didn't deserve it. I said I'd be here. He gripped my hand stubbornly, his gaze unwavering. For my sake, for your own sake. Please, just fight to live. Okay. Looking into his bloodshot eyes, seeing the worry and desperate hope, I finally nodded. Maybe. It really was time to live for myself. Lisa and my adoptive parents never came back to the hospital. Gavin told me that after the miscarriage, the wealthy man's wife found out. Lisa was thrown out and sued for a huge sum of money. Her life was a wreck, felt no schadenfreude. Only a bitter amusement. Everything she'd schemed for had ultimately turned to dust. One afternoon, Gavin stepped out to fetch water. The door to my room creaked open. I looked up, expecting him, but saw my adoptive mother standing in the doorway, clutching a fruit basket. Delia. She approached, placing the basket on the nightstand, her tone awkward. We heard, you weren't doing well. I didn't speak, just stared coldly. What new game was this? About before. We were wrong. She twisted her hands, avoiding my eyes. Your father and I. We regret it. Regret. Regret not using me to latch onto Gavin. Regret Lisa failing to marry into money. Go away. I closed my eyes, unable to bear the sight of her face. I don't want to see you. Delia, please. She grabbed my hand, her voice urgent. I know you blame us. But think, we raised you all those years. Doesn't that count for something? Now you're so sick. You need someone to take care of you. Gavin is kind, but he's not family. I snapped my eyes open. What are you getting at? Her eyes lit up, leaning closer. I heard. Gavin is spending a fortune on your treatment. You know our situation, we can't help much. But, that kidney transplant. Lisa. She happens to be a match. What? I stared at her in disbelief, then a sharp pain clenched my chest, stealing my breath. You want Lisa to donate a kidney to me? Just hear me out. She pleaded. Liza's in trouble now. That rich man is suing her, says she treated him for money and affection. If we could settle that problem, get her to donate a kidney. It would solve both problems, wouldn't it? Solve both problems. I stared at this woman, a chill of pure horror running through me. She could actually say this. That was her own daughter. How could she contemplate carving out her daughter's kidney for money, for this so-called solution? Chapter 6. Get out. I screamed with every ounce of strength left, my voice cracking with rage and revulsion. The heart monitor screamed again, its line jagged, mirroring the turmoil inside me. I despised Lisa, but I never wanted her kidney. My adoptive mother jumped back, startled by my reaction, then quickly plastered on that fake concern again. Delia, I'm thinking of you. Lisa is young, losing a kidney won't affect her much. But for you, it's life or death. I trembled with fury. The IV needle tore loose as I thrashed, a bruise instantly blooming on my hand. Why don't you donate? She's your own flesh and blood. You'd trade her organ for status. You're not human. Have no choice. She shrieked, stung to the core. The mess she made, why should the whole family suffer? Trading a kidney is better than jail. Besides, you need it. Helping each other out, what's wrong with that? Looking at her twisted face, I felt a profound sadness. This was my nominal mother. A woman who could dress up such a vile transaction in noble clothes. I started laughing, tears streaming down uncontrollably. I'd rather die than take her kidney. Get out. Now. Just then, Gavin pushed the door open. He took in the scene my adoptive mother, my bleeding hand, the screaming monitor, and his face darkened like a thundercloud. What did you do to her? He shoved my adoptive mother aside, his voice colder than ice. She stumbled, caught her balance, and instantly adopted a victim's posture. Gavin, don't misunderstand. I came to see how Delia was, but she. I don't want to hear a word from you. Gavin cut her off, his gaze glacial. From this moment on, you are not to set foot in this hospital again. If I see you harassing her one more time, he paused, his voice dropping dangerously, I won't be responsible for what I do. Including exposing everything, how you treated Delia, how you shamed with Lisa to the press. My adoptive mother's face turned deathly pale. She clearly hadn't expected Gavin to know so much. Her lips trembled for a long moment, but she didn't dare say another word, slinking out like a whipped dog. Silence finally descended on the room, broken only by my ragged breathing and the monitor's steadying beep. Gavin knelt by the bed, carefully readjusting my IV, then gently wiped the tears from my face with a towel. He took my hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a feather-light kiss. I'm here now. No one will hurt you again. After that, Gavin hired a full-time nurse, ensuring someone was always with me, guarding against my adoptive mother's return. My body slowly healed, but the kidney failure hung over me like a sword. The doctor said my kidney function was critically low. Without a transplant, I had maybe 6 months. Gavin mobilized every contact, scored everywhere for a match. But the results were always disappointing. Each time he returned, exhausted, shaking his head saying nothing yet, my heart sank lower. I started dreaming constantly, always back in that kidnappers' warehouse. Darkness, the smell of kidnappers, cigarettes and sweat. Someone saying, dump the brat, no one wants her. Another voice, wait, maybe her folks will come through. Back then, I'd hugged my knees, repeating, someone will come. Someone will save me. But now, I know. The only one who could save me was myself, and a sliver of blind luck. Chapter 7. Days passed in a haze of waiting. Spring arrived quietly. Outside the hospital window, bare branches sprouted tender green buds. The sunlight grew warmer. My health fluctuated. Some days I could sit up and read. Others, I lacked the strength to speak. Gavin read me the news daily, told me funny stories from his company, or reminisced with me about the orphanage. He said when I got better, he'd take me south, to see the ocean. He said winters were mild there, with flowers that never stopped blooming. I smiled and nodded, knowing deep down it might only be a beautiful dream. One afternoon, drowsy, Gavin burst into the room, waving a file, his voice trembling. Delia. Found it. We found a kidney. My eyes flew open, disbelief warring with hope. Really? Really? He thrust the file towards me, tears glistening in his eyes. A donor who passed unexpectedly. All the markers match perfectly. The doctor says surgery can be scheduled for Monday. Seeing the words match confirmed on the paper, tears welled up instantly. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. A miracle. It was possible. Gavin, I whispered, if the surgery fails, promise me you'll live well. Forget me. Don't say that. He pressed a finger to my lips, his own eyes reddening. The surgery will succeed. When you're well. We'll get married. Okay. I nodded, tears falling freely. The surgery was successful. When I woke from the anesthesia, Gavin was the first thing I saw. He was slumped beside the bed, deep shadows under his eyes, but a smile touched his lips, as if dreaming something sweet. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden halo around him, warm and beautiful. I moved my fingers. He woke instantly, asking urgently, pain? Any discomfort? Isang shook my head, managing a weak smile. I'm okay. In that moment, I know. I had truly come back to life. Recovery was long and arduous. Gavin stayed by my side, bathing me, feeding me, massaging my swollen legs. He became the most attentive nurse on the ward. Even the nurses smiled. Delia, you're truly blessed. I know I was blessed. That blessing was Gavin's gift to me. The day I was discharged, the sun was brilliant. Gavin helped me into a new dress he'd bought white, like angel wings. He held my hand as we walked step by step out of the hospital doors. Sunlight bathed us, warm and comforting. Where to? He asked. The sea, I said. We went to a coastal city in the south. The sky was blue, the sea was blue, the air thick with salt spray. Gavin rented an apartment with an ocean view. Every day, he walked with me on the beach, watching sunrises and sunsets. My health improved day by day. Color returned to my cheeks. Gavin said when I smiled, it outshone the sun. One evening, we Saturday on the sand, watching distant city lights. Gavin suddenly reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box, and knelt on one knee. He opened it to reveal a simple platinum band. Delia. He looked into my eyes, his voice soft but unwavering. I know I'm not the best. I know you've been through terrible things. But I promise you, from this day forward, I will spend my life loving you, protecting you, making you happy, making you feel cherished. Always, marry me. Please. I looked at him, tears falling again. Happy tears. Yes. I nodded, holding out my hand. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. He stood, pulling me into a tight embrace, his chin resting on my head. Thank you, Delia. Thank you for giving me this chance. I should thank you, I said. Thank you for never giving up on me. Chapter 8. 3 years after we settled by the sea, a letter arrived from the Legal Aid Center in my hometown. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar. I opened it while basking in the sunlight on the balcony lounge chair. Gavin was in the kitchen, simmering my favorite soup. The aroma mingled with the salty sea breeze, warm and soporific. The letter stated that my adoptive parents were facing criminal prosecution for involvement in an illegal public deposit-taking scheme, involving over $3 million. During the investigation, police also uncovered that years earlier, to smooth the way for Liza, they had forged documents to seize the property of an elderly, childless widow. This was the source of the trouble. My adoptive mother had tried to trade Liza's kidney for legal deposits. Gavin brought over the soup, frowning as he read the letter. When did they get mixed up in that? Liza, however, was relegated to a footnote in the letter. It mentioned that after my adoptive parents' arrest, Liza lost her last support. The wealthy man she'd seen as her ticket into high society had long since vanished. Without stable work and burdened by previous debts, her life had become destitute. Neighbors reported seeing her picking discarded vegetable leaves at the market, her hair brittle and yellow, wearing faded old clothes, a far cry from the delicate poor little thing she'd played for her parents. My fingers tightened on the letter, my emotions complex and unclear. I had hated Liza. But seeing her current state, I felt no gloating satisfaction, only a strange, numb calmness. She too had been a victim of that toxic environment, the transactional affection. But she had chosen to rob the warmth that wasn't hers, using even more vicious means. In the end, she grasped at nothing, and even the fragile illusion of family love had shattered. Should we go see her? Gavin took my hand, his palm warm. I shook my head. No need. Everyone must bear the weight of their choices. Liza's path was hers to walk, just as mine had been paved step by step. In the autumn, Gavin took me back to the orphanage. The old tree still stood, its branches thicker now. The crooked characters G and D we'd carved into the trunk as children were still faintly visible. Auntie Lee, who used to care for us, had retired, her hair mostly white. But she recognized us instantly. Pelia, you've grown tall, blossomed. Auntie Lee held my hand, her eyes reddening. You used to hide behind that tree and cry, saying you wanted a family. Now it's good. With Gavin here, your days ahead will be bright. As we were leaving, Auntie Lee pressed a cloth bundle into my hands, saying she'd found it while sorting old things. Inside was a yellowed notebook, its cover bearing two crudely drawn stick figures, one tall, one short, holding hands. My childhood notebook. I turned to the last page. Written in childish scrawl, today Gavin was adopted. He said he'd come back for me. I'll wait. Beneath it, in slightly larger handwriting, unmistakably Gavin's, written later when he returned, I'm back, Delia. Come with me. Fears suddenly fell. Some promises, it turned out, could cross mountains and seas, endure the passage of time, and ultimately be kept. 2 years later, Gavin and I had a daughter. She had his bright eyes. When she smiled, they curved into crescents, like the wind chimes that used to hang from the old tree at the orphanage. We named her Rachel, remembering the hardships, cherishing the peace. On Rachel's 1-month celebration, the sun shone brightly. I held her on the balcony lounge chair. Gavin Saturday beside us, singing Anne of Key lullaby. Sunlight bathed Rachel's tiny face. She yawned, her small hand clutching my finger tightly. Gavin came over, wrapping his arms gently around us from behind, his chin resting on my head. What are you thinking? He asked. Thinking, I gazed at the waves rolling in the distance. A smile blooming. How fortunate we are. That we're all okay. Thinking, I gazed at the waves rolling in the distance. A smile blooming. How fortunate we are. That we're all okay. The sea breeze blew in, carrying the scent of salt and spray, and the promise of new beginnings. I knew the road ahead was long, but as long as he was beside me, with Rachel, with this tangible warmth within reach, I feared nothing. The darkness of the past had ultimately failed to block the dawn. And I, finally, had rebuilt my own home upon the ruins.